Two of the most popular drivers currently on the market I have in my hands here. I've got the PING G400 and the TaylorMade M2, and these two drivers really do sit as competitors against each other. They're pretty much the same price. I think the PING G400 is £20 more expensive than the M2 at $389 versus $369, and they offer the same level of adjustability. So not a huge amount of adjustability. You can move the loft sleeve, so you can change the loft up or down just to dial in exactly the right ball flight that you're looking for. But essentially there's not a huge amount of adjustment in terms of movable weights and centres of gravity. What both drivers do promise is a really good level of forgiveness and distance in a package that's really simple and easy to understand. So we felt like it was a good idea to put these two drivers head to head against each other and see how the performance stacks up. Now we split the results of this test up into 5 different categories. There's aesthetics, power, forgiveness, feel and accuracy. And what we really wanted to do was, by splitting it up, show you which areas each driver performs really well in, so that if you are in the market, if you are interested in investing in a new driver, you know roughly which areas each driver excels in. Now just a quick word on how we did the test. We tested both drivers in the 9.5 degree head. We used a similar X-Flex shaft. We used the PING Tour stiff shaft and a Aldila Rogue X-Flex shaft in the TaylorMade. We used Pro V1 golf balls. We used the GC Quad launch monitor. The only difference between these two drivers is I used the LS Tech version of the PING and the standard version of the M2. There's obviously no low spinning version of the M2. Otherwise they were set up pretty much the same. Let's take a look at the results. Okay, starting with the aesthetics, and they're quite different actually. The M2 is slightly bigger than the G400. The G400, the footprint behind the ball is a little bit smaller. And this is a slightly more classic looking driver. It's all black, obviously. You have the turbulators on top of the head and the Dragonfly technology, which hints at the technology that PING have been able to build into this driver. Whereas in the M2, obviously, you've got the contrasting colours. And if it was, for me, my choice, I'd pick the M2. I think they've absolutely nailed the shelf appeal of this club. It looks great on the shelf. And actually that contrast of colours between the white crown and the black sort of back part of the head, it frames the ball really nicely at address. And as I say, that bigger footprint, it looked better to my eye. It frames the ball really nicely and it's really confidence inspiring. When it comes to forgiveness, I think it's important just to explain what we're referring to exactly here. And that's forgiveness on off-centre hits. It's not about accuracy. There's a part of the test later on about accuracy. But in this one, what we're talking about here is how consistent are the distances. How consistent are the different distances when you hit the ball right out the middle of the face versus ones that are slightly out of the heel and slightly out of the toe. The winner for me in that category was the PING G400. I think there was a total of 12 yards difference between my best hit and my worst hit. I didn't hit any shots. I think this is the most important point. I didn't hit a single shot with the G400 that carried less than 2.78, I think it was, which shows a really consistent and high level of distance through the air. The TaylorMade isn't very far behind, of course it isn't, but for me, the club that was slightly more forgiving was the PING G400. Right, so I'm going to flash up the launch monitor data for both clubs so you can see exactly the results I was getting from the test. In terms of ball speed, I was getting 1 mile an hour more, so not a huge amount, but a little bit more with the PING G400 at 163 versus 162. The TaylorMade M2 was launching higher, and it's something that I certainly noticed during the test itself. The flight of the M2 was certainly higher. It was spinning a little bit more as well. Both were spinning low actually, and that's interesting because I had the LS Tech version, the low spinning version of the PING G400, but obviously just the standard version of the M2, and even the M2 was spinning just over 2,000 RPM, so both of them are low spinning drivers. As I said before, the peak height of the TaylorMade is a little bit more, but the overall distance of the G400 was more. So it's carrying a little bit more, 1 yard further through the air. I don't have the total yardage difference between two drivers, but because it's going on a lower flight, carrying further through the air, the overall distance with the G400 was slightly greater. So in terms of power, the carry distances were very close between them, but the winner was the PING G400, a little bit more through the air and certainly a little bit more on the ground. So in terms of accuracy, there really isn't much to choose between these two drivers. On the launch monitor, from the data that I flashed up in the previous screen, the M2 was slightly ahead. I've also taken both of these drivers out on the golf course. And you know, there really isn't much to choose from in terms of the accuracy on offer from both of these drivers. I'd say it was comparable. If I had to pick a driver to hit a fairway, it might well be the M2. It's that confidence-inspiring look. I think I like the look of it, address. Looking down, I don't feel like I have to swing it quite so hard to get great performance out of it. because of that slightly bigger footprint behind the ball. So not much to choose from in terms of accuracy. If I had to choose one, it would be the M2. Okay, so the field category is really an interesting one for me, and it's something I mentioned in a previous head-to-head video. With the G400, I feel like Ping have made a huge leap forward in terms of the feel of their product. It just feels really strong through the ball. It offers a sounder impact that is strong, it's powerful, it's really sort of satisfying, confidence inspiring. The M2 is a little bit louder, a little bit less powerful to my ear than the Ping G400. So if I was going to pick a driver based on feel, it would be the Ping G400. I think the engineers have really nailed this one. It sounds absolutely fantastic and it's right up there with the best on the market. Okay, so on to the verdict, and I really don't want to cop out. I'm going to tell you which one of these two drivers I'd put into my bag, but before I do, just to say that picking a winner between these two is a real case of splitting hairs. There is a reason that both of them are so popular. There's a reason that they're both direct competitors in the marketplace, and that's because the performance on offer from the both of them is very, very similar, and it's very, very good across the board. It doesn't matter which category you're looking at, both of these drivers perform really well. There's not one category where one or other of them is let down by its performance. Both sets of engineers working on these products have done a really, really good job. And so you're going to have to make your decision based on certain things that are right for your game. Now for me, if it was my choice, if I was choosing which driver to put into my bag, I think the TaylorMade M2 just edges it. And that's really because of the on-course testing I did. As you can see from the launch monitor data that I flashed up, the performances on offer from both of them were very, very good across the board. The Ping G400 was slightly longer, the M2 was slightly more accurate, and that's something that I found while I was out on the golf course as well. The M2 was slightly more accurate. Now that's maybe because it's a little bit shorter. I hit a couple more fairways with it. And I think the other factor that really counted for me was the look of the M2. I prefer the slightly bigger footprint down behind the ball. I like the way that this frames the ball. Now I think the other point worth making is that both of these drivers span really low. It's something I said, and this is the low spinning version of this driver, but there's also a standard version of the Ping G400 and an SFT, straight flight technology version of this driver that will straighten up anyone with a tendency to hit a slice. Whereas in the M2 you just have this standard version and you have a draw bias version as well. So there are more options with the Ping G400, but it's £20 more expensive. So these are all things to think about. There is an awful lot to think about when you're going through this process. What I would say is, try and do what I've done. Put both of them against each other. Hit them, preferably out on the golf course. I know that's not always possible, but hit both of them against each other. By flicking from one to the other, you'll soon pick up on the differences, the subtle differences in the feel, in the flight, in the overall performances. And only by doing that will you find the one that's exactly right for your game. What I do know is that both brands have got a very strong performing driver here. So whatever you're looking for, whether it's the flight, the feel, the distance, the forgiveness, go through the process that I went through and you will find one that is right for your game.